Good evening, everybody. There you go. Fantastic. So, first of all, let me all welcome you, our members of the Harris Council. Want to welcome you. We had a fantastic day today talking about the future of the school. Alumni, members of the Alumni Council, students, alumni, friends, supporters, welcome tonight. Thank you for joining us. My name is Daniel Diermeyer. I'm the Dean of the Harris School. And tonight's event is a celebration of the University of Chicago's founding 125 years ago. So I guess there are, almost 101 years older than the Harris School, but who's counting? This anniversary of the university is an opportunity for us to celebrate our 125 years of inquiry and impact. And these events are really intended to reflect on important chapters in the university's history, our community past and present, and on the founding principles that have made this university great. We also, at this moment and this particular time today, which is almost a year after we had the 25th anniversary celebration of the Harris School, it's a great moment for us to reflect a little bit back on the last year, some of the accomplishments that we've had. We were able to start thinking about a new home for the Harris School, thanks to generous support by Dennis Keller and King Harris. We were able to bring new great faculty to the Harris School, some eminent scholars, some of them you will have heard about, like Jim Robinson, Konstantin Sonin, really adding some new talent to the school, particularly thinking about international and global issues. And then most recently, we were proud to celebrate the $100 million gift to establish the Pearson Institute for the Study and Resolution of Global Conflicts and the Pearson Global Forum. It was a happy and celebratory day for us a month and a half ago when we announced the creation of the Pearson Institute. This weekend, of course, was just a sad, tragic reminder of the importance of its mission. It is now my pleasure to introduce to you a very special member of our community, Joan Harris. Many of you know her for her civic leadership and unparalleled contributions to the arts and her dedicated support of the Joan W. and Irving B. Harris Theater for Music and Dance. For her many contributions, she received the 2013 National Medal of Arts from President Barack Obama. But today we welcome Joan as a tireless supporter of the Harris School, whose extraordinary generosity has spurred additional philanthropy and has really enabled to make all the progress that we have made in recent years. And just as importantly, she's a link to Irving's legacy and a good friend. Please join me in welcoming Joan Harris.
Well, I'm so glad to see such a large group of people here today. I'm very lucky. I get to get all the thanks and take all the credit for something that I have nothing to do with, really. My late husband, Irving Harris, was the force behind the establishment of the Harris School. In many ways, many of you knew him, and those of you who didn't know him, I'm sorry that you didn't get to know him. Irving has really never left the room, to be quite honest with you. He was a man of enormous vision and power. He was so smart. He saw possibilities where other people didn't see them. And there was a moment in the history of the University of Chicago when Irving understood that either the then Committee on Public Policy was going to go away altogether, or it had to be converted into a full-blown school. And he just said, count me in. I want this to happen. And he wanted it to happen for a very, very specific reason. Irving thought we all ought to step forward and try to change the world just a little bit. He had a very strong belief that young people, many young people wanted to change the world, but didn't want to go to medical school or law school. but there needed to be a safe, stimulating place for students to enter the world of public policy so that they in turn could go out and do what he thought was so important. That was Irving Harris then. Today, there's a whole new generation of people who have taken up the gauntlet. The principal driving force in Irving's life was his belief that we needed to take care of our children. 0 to 3 was his mantra, and that's what he devoted his life to do. And I'm very happy to tell you that tonight we have somebody in not even the next generation, several generations behind Irving, who has taken up the gauntlet. And that's Diana Rauner. Now, I want to know if anybody ever said that beauty and brains don't go together, you're wrong. Because Diana is all of that. She has she has altogether the intelligence, the drive, and the grace to take what she does in early childhood and move it forward with such success. She has made and continues to make the strongest possible case for the nurturing of our youngest children. As president of the Ounce of Prevention, Diana has led an organization that strongly advocates for the youngest of our children, those who have no voice of their own, but who must rely on the adults in the world to advocate for them until they can take their place. So infants and children are very, very important to her. The Ounce engages in research, in daycare, and has had, works in a hands-on way. The creation of the EduCare Center is maybe one of the most important things that could have happened, not just because there's a wonderful early childhood center on the South Side, but because EduCare has caused to be replicated. I don't know how many, I can't remember how many. 21 other EduCare centers around the country. We need to be so proud of all that. Now, Diana didn't get to where she is just by, by luck. She has a very impressive educational background. She has a BA from Yale. She has an MBA from Stanford. And she has a PhD in developmental psychology from our University of Chicago. I'm not even going to tell you all the other things she does because I'm very anxious. She's got a piano lesson pretty soon, so I want her to come up, sir. I want you to meet Diana Rauner.
Thank you, Joan. It is actually a tremendous honor to be here and to be included on this program with such distinguished researchers and introduced by such a distinguished leader of the university. I do have the privilege and sometimes the challenge of bringing Irving's vision and legacy into the 21st century. It is a great honor, and it's a tremendous opportunity to lead the Ounce and the wonderful people at the Ounce of Prevention Fund, and so many of our partners here in the room, our partners and supporters, and the many people that we partner with at the University of Chicago. Of course, Ariel and her work, as well as our folks in developmental psychology at Jim Heckman Center and at SSA. So the roots and the connections between the Ounce of Prevention Fund and the University of Chicago are deep and rich. I was an Irving Harris Fellow. I don't know if you know that, Joan, at the, in my graduate program here in developmental psychology. And one of the geniuses, of course, of Irving's focus on early childhood was that he thought really about the entire system, about the development of leadership, about supporting the universities and supporting PhD students like myself, but also supporting policy, supporting program. And really that was, we all recognize that it is a truth universally acknowledged, and I have to say, not just in the United States, in every early childhood advocacy and program setting across the United States. Irving Harris is sort of recognized as the prime mover in the early childhood movement, but across the world. And it's a truth universally acknowledged that he was decades ahead of his time in understanding the importance of neuroscience, in understanding the importance of parenting and of the family relationships. I think there are two other things that we think about at the Ounce that we also think of as Irving's legacy. The first is that we at the Ounce always describe ourselves as bilingual in program and policy. And that was really Irving's vision that soon after the Ounce was created, the policy division at the Ounce was created, and the idea that really program knowledge and developments worked in concert with policy really was part of his vision of how to change the world. And it has been, I think, an extraordinarily effective vision. The other really important thing that I think Irving brought to early childhood, to the Ounce of Prevention Fund, and to the field in general, that we have tried to continue and to fortify, has been really a focus on data, a focus on understanding the evidence and living by the evidence. Joan mentioned the Educare School. What she didn't mention was the Beethoven Project, because, of course, the Beethoven Project is the program that was also Irving's brainchild, that ran for many years, and then with an evaluation from the University of Chicago that showed that it wasn't doing all that it could. It was actually the courage and challenge of Irving and colleagues who said, we're going to try something different. In the social sciences and social services, people don't stop doing things, even when they get bad data. Very often they throw the data away. But what we have learned from that experience is you have to listen to what the data tells you. And when the data says you're not doing a good job, you have to start again. And that, perhaps, is the most important legacy that we've continued. So it is a great honor to be part of this program, because so many of the interactions that we have here at the university with so many of the thought leaders here have stimulated and developed the work that we try to put into practice every day, and have allowed us to push the boundaries both of program and policy. And so I'm very honored to have the opportunity to introduce Ariel, Kalil, and Susan Mayer. Ariel is a professor at the Harris School. She's the director of the Center for Human Potential and Public Policy, and the co-director of the Behavioral Insights and Parenting Lab. Her current research examines the historic evolution of income-based gaps in parenting behavior and children's cognitive and non-cognitive skills. At the Behavioral Insights and Parenting Lab, she's leading a variety of field experiments designed to strengthen parent engagement and child development in low-income families using tools drawn from behavioral neuroscience. Susan Mayer is a professor at the Chicago Harris and the college, co-director of the Behavioral Insights and Parenting Lab with Ariel, and served as dean of the Harris School from 2002 to 2009. She has published numerous articles and book chapters on the measurement of poverty, the effect of growing up in poor neighborhoods, and the effect of parental income on children's well-being. She's currently doing research on intergenerational economic mobility and using behavioral insights to help low-income adults become better parents. It's my pleasure to welcome Ariel and Susan to the stage. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Daniel and Joan and Diana, especially for that very kind introduction. I think I speak for Susan and myself in saying how proud we are in doing what we can to carry out Irving's legacy at the Harris School. But we're going to dive right in. And before, I just want to say, you picked up index cards out in the hallway to write questions for Susan and me. I encourage you to do so early and often, and at the end we'll have some help collecting the index cards, and we'll take your questions at the end. But I'm going to just start it off by asking Susan to switch places with me and tell us a little bit more about the problem that we're talking about tonight.
So we have a little tag team going tonight. So the problem that we're dealing with is one that will be familiar to many people in this room, and that is that disadvantaged children fare worse than advantaged children on just about everything we measure. Well, literally everything we measure. They have worse scores on tests of cognitive development. They get fewer years of schooling. They earn less as an adult and therefore are more likely to be poor as an adult. They have worse health, both as a child and as an adult. They are more likely to both commit and be the victim of crimes. And the differences, I'll show you this chart. Something that's really important is that the differences in cognitive and behavioral outcomes between advantaged and disadvantaged children are present before children begin school, and they hardly diminish at all over the school years. So on this you can see that top line is the cognitive scores of children whose parents have a college education, and the bottom two lines are high school and less than high school. It's maybe not surprising that the children of more highly educated parents have higher cognitive skills, but what is more surprising is that those gaps don't narrow at all as children go through school. We've known for a long time that disadvantaged children fare worse than advantaged children, and we've tried many strategies to help disadvantaged children catch up. Evaluations of model and experimental preschool programs, which I'll show you a little bit here, show us that in these model programs, children who, okay, so just let me explain. This is peri-preschool and the Abecedarian program, two extremely well-known programs. These were randomized trials or randomized field tests, and the red bar shows the high school graduation rate for the kids who were in the preschool programs, peri or abecedarian, and the gray bar shows the kids who were randomly assigned to the control group. So you can see that the kids who got these programs did much better, and they did much better later in life as well. And so this sort of inspired us to think that we could just have a bunch of preschools and children would do better. Unfortunately, evaluations of Head Start, which is the main government-funded preschool program for disadvantaged children, suggest that on average, and there's a lot of variation in Head Start programs, but on average, most Head Start programs have modest effects on improving children's cognitive and behavioral readiness for school. But maybe that's not so surprising when we remember that children between the ages of 0 and 18 will spend only about 13% of their waking hours in schools. All that other time is in families. Even children who go to full day preschool from age 3 will only spend a little less than 15% of their waking hours in schools. So the key then to closing the gap in child outcomes is in closing the gap in what families do. That doesn't say that preschool isn't important. It doesn't say that schools is important. It just says we can't close those gaps without paying attention to families. Our starting point for this effort needs to be understanding the differences in parent engagement between advantaged and disadvantaged children. So, Ariel, can you tell us more about that?
I sure can. Let's see. One of the things that I think one of the most regular observations that we make in the social sciences, and this is in developmental psychology literature or sociology, and it's from time diary data or survey data, is that there are reliable and statistically significant differences in both the amount and the kind of time that parents spend engaged with their children. And this is, for children of all ages. So what you can see here are just daily differences, so number number of minutes on any given day, this is drawn from a nationally representative time diary survey, in the number of minutes that mothers, in this case, spend with their preschool-age children. And you can see here we're just comparing the time that is spent by mothers who have completed a college degree versus those mothers who have not gone beyond high school. And you can see that there are reliable differences in basic care, in play, and in teaching. So this is just, on any given day, what would be the gap in the number of minutes. And you might think, well, if we look at play, that's only 11 minutes a day of play. How big a deal can that be? Well, if you add up all those daily minutes across the course of the preschool years, it turns out to be 158 hours of developmentally relevant playtime between a caregiver and a preschool-age child. And that's the equivalent of approximately a half a year of an early childhood education intervention program. So the point here is that these big differences add up. This is a stylized fact showing something that we have known for many, many years, hence the great effort that has been devoted to developing a variety of interventions to improve the quantity and quality of parent engagement. And we think that these approaches to supporting parent engagement in the home generally combine two different dimensions. They often rely on classroom or group instruction for parents, typically mothers, but including a range of caregivers, to provide information about parenting. On the other hand, they rely on home visits, a professional or a paraprofessional to go into the home and work with caregivers to better engage with their children. I would say a few things about these approaches. One, they tend to be quite expensive. They also tend to be quite demanding of parents' time and attention. These programs are generally developed to last on the order of 2, sometimes even 3 years. And unfortunately, the programs have not made, on average, a big dent in the kinds of outcomes we're looking for. They have not moved the needle as much as we have hoped on this quantity and quality of parent engagement with kids. And part of the problem arises from a lack or a limit of parents' own engagement with the programs themselves. So another thing that we observe reliably from the better known and the whole landscape of programs of this sort is that attrition tends to be very high, and engagement, as rated by those who are delivering the program themselves, on average tends to be quite low. So as you can see here in the Nurse-Family Partnership, which is a very well-known program relying on nurse home visits, as the name implies, fully half of the parents have dropped out of the program by the halfway point for which the program was designed. In Early Head Start, for example, another well-known program, practitioners themselves rate a third of the parents as only inconsistently engaged. So this is a problem, and this is a problem that we're very concerned about in the work that we're doing. I'd also like to underscore that, as I alluded to, many of these programs take as their approach what we call an information model. They work primarily on the theory that disadvantaged parents need more information about how to parent their children, or that they need to be informed about what kind of parenting behavior is important, or about how to do particular kinds of parenting behaviors. But our work, and I would say the work of many others, shows that in fact information is actually not the problem. It's certainly not the only problem. Parents do know that their children benefit when they spend time with them. And here's a slide from some of our own recent survey work in Chicago showing clearly that parents believe that the more time they invest in their kids in developmentally stimulating activities, the better their kids will do. So we have this puzzle. We know from lots of survey data, as I just showed you, that there's a big gap in the amount of time that parents from different economic backgrounds are spending with their children. We know at the same time that all parents want the best for their children, and that most low-income parents understand the importance of the kinds of behaviors that promote their children's development. We also know from other work we've done that low-income and middle-class parents enjoy spending that kind of time in equal measure. So the way we think about the problem in our lab is about closing this gap between what we call aspirational parenting, or all the things that all parents of all economic backgrounds want for their children, and the actual parenting or kinds of parent engagement that's going on in the home. And our mission in the lab is to solve this puzzle. So I'm going to turn it back to Susan to talk a little more about this puzzle and what we're doing to solve it.
We actually coordinated how we crossed each other here. Just so you know. But okay, so I'll begin by explaining what we mean by behavioral insights and why we decided to call the lab that we work with the Behavioral Insights in Parenting Lab. The field of behavioral science has shown us that decision-making is influenced by a number of cognitive biases, or sometimes called cognitive roadblocks, that we all experience. These are common patterns of thinking that often result in suboptimal decision-making. And I'm going to talk about one specific bias that we focused on in our work. So. Imagine you've promised yourself to lose a few pounds. You've sworn off empty carbohydrates. You're at a breakfast meeting. You're hungry. The tray of donuts is just inches away. Do you resist and not take one? Or do you give in? Let's see what some little kids did when they were faced with a similar situation. So this is the video.
Okay, sit in that chair. All right, here's the deal. Marshmallow for you. You can either wait, and I'll give you another one if you wait, or you can eat it now. When I come back, I'll give you another one, so then you'll have two. But stay in here and stay in the chair till I come back, okay? All right. I'm gonna go do something and then I'll come back.
It smells yummy. It smells really good.
Okay, well, there are many lessons we can learn from this famous marshmallow experiment that was first done in 1968 by Walter Mischel. But for our purposes this evening, the point is that it's often hard to resist gratification now in the aid of a reward later. And in behavioral science, this is an example of what's known as present bias. That is putting so much weight on gratification in the present that you fail to invest in the future. And we all do this. We put off exercising today, promising ourselves we'll start tomorrow. We don't save enough for retirement because, well, those shoes were really cute, and so we spend our money today instead of saving it. And we all do this, even when we know what we should do, and even when we have the ability and the opportunity to do it. Present bias can prevent us from making optimal decisions. It results in procrastination and creates a gap between aspirational behavior and actual behavior. And for a variety of reasons, disadvantaged adults may be more prone to present bias, and the costs of present bias may be greater for disadvantaged adults. So this is an important issue to look at when you're thinking about parenting, because parenting also provides lots of opportunity for cognitive biases to get in the way of our good intentions, and especially for present bias to get in the way. Because to be a good parent, you have to have discipline today to do all the things that children need. Make sure they brush their teeth every night, make sure they do their homework, make sure they don't stay out too late, make sure they don't watch too much television, and often there's lots of, give and take that goes on when you do this. But the reward for being that good parent isn't for many years in the future. And so it takes a lot of future orientation to be a good parent, to invest in the future. This makes it easy to put off today what we hope to do tomorrow. Fortunately, behavioral science has also provided us with a toolbox of things that we can do to adapt to some cognitive biases. For example, commitment devices, like making your goals public, and reminders can help overcome procrastination. So it's our goal in the Behavioral Insights and Parenting Lab to harness the insights from behavioral science to help parents achieve their own parenting skills. And now I'm going to turn it back to Ariel to say a little bit more about what we're learning about this in our lab.
So what I'd like to do is describe the results from our latest project from the lab called the Parents and Children Together, or PACT project. And building on the ideas that Susan just described, we thought that this is a project focused in particular on the amount of time that parents spend reading with their preschool-age children. And we thought that one reason that disadvantaged caregivers might be less likely to read to their children is this procrastination arising from present bias, sort of the habit of sitting down every night at bedtime to read stories when there are many other distractions is easier to adopt and sustain when you have a focus on the future and you can understand the link between this sort of present investment and a long-run outcome. And what we wanted to do was devise a strategy that helped parents break through those cognitive roadblocks that stood in the way of their regularly reading to their children, which, as I alluded to before, is an important dimension of parenting that separates low-income parents from their middle-class peers. So what we did last year was work with almost 200 families across the city of Chicago. We partnered with 8 different child care sites that provided subsidized slots to low-income children in the city. And these almost 200 families whom we enrolled in the study and randomized to a treatment and control group borrowed a digital tablet for 6 weeks to use at home. And on this tablet was only one app, and that was a digital library app that opened up onto a library of approximately 500 books in both Spanish and English, so we delivered the program in those 2 languages. And the books, there were picture books, and there were books with words, and there were books at many different literacy levels that were chosen, not by us, but by others for their relevance for preschool-age children. And when parents opened a book on the tablet, an audio and video recording automatically began. And this was critical for us so we could have an objective measure of the amount of time that parents and children were reading together. Now, as I said, we randomly divided those parents who expressed interest in the program into 2 groups, the treatment and control. The treatment group was provided with a number of these supports or nudges that were drawn from the field of behavioral science that Susan just described. Those parents were asked to set a goal each week for the amount of time they planned and hoped to spend reading with their child using this tool. Every weekday, those parents in the treatment or experimental group got a text message reminder reminding them of the goal that they had set. At the end of every week, the parents were shown a chart that compared their goal with the actual amount of time they had spent reading. And recall, we had an objective measure of that time because the tablet was automatically collecting it. And if the parent met his or her goal, and these were primarily mothers, they got a congratulatory message on the tablet. The other group, the control group, was also allowed and invited to borrow that digital tablet for 6 weeks to use at home. They didn't get any of those messages or those interactions. They were simply told, this is a fun way to read with your child. Feel free to use this device and this app as often as you would like. And what we wanted to know, obviously, was how big an impact that treatment had on the amount of time that the parents in the experimental group spent reading. And we found at the end of 6 weeks that the treatment group had read 2.5 times as much as the control group. So this is a very large, highly statistically significant, and for those of you who follow the literature in this area, the treatment impact was a full standard deviation. So in the world of parenting interventions, this is pretty much off the charts in terms of treatment impact. And what's important to note about this is that many more highly intensive and very expensive programs have achieved far less in terms of program impact. Now, how did this large treatment impact arise? Well, we have an answer to that question. We know that it arose because the goal setting and those text message reminders brought the future to the present. That is, we believe that the behavioral tools that we used were able to overcome the procrastination that often gets in the way of engaging in particular behaviors that arises from present bias. Now, how do we know this? We know this because we actually measured the degree of present bias among our parents. So we devised a tool, a survey tool, that allowed us to understand the degree to which parents were present versus future-oriented. And what we found is that, well, first of all, this is not what's on the slide, is that parents who greatly discounted the future or who were more present-oriented were the least likely to read to their children. And we should have expected that from our data, and that's exactly what we found. But more interestingly, what we found is that it is those present-oriented parents who responded the most to our treatment. It's those parents who are represented with the red bar who had an enormous response to the treatment, whereas those parents who were already focused on the future didn't have as big an impact in the program because they were already reading more. So this is exactly the pattern of results you would expect to find if it is present bias that is standing in the way of parents reaching the goals that they set for themselves. So in other words, we should know that parents who do not read to their children are no less likely to care for their children, and they're no less likely to believe in the importance of reading with their children. They just procrastinate more. And our results, we believe, are so exciting because they show that a very low cost and very simple set of tools can help parents overcome that procrastination and make a very big difference to their engagement with their children. So that's just one highlight from our recent work. And the big question that Susan and I and all the fantastic people on our team are grappling with now is how can we use what we're learning to inform a wider and broader set of interventions that address a range of parental behavior. And what I'd like to do now is turn it back to Susan to tell you a little bit more about our efforts on that front.
Well, first thing to know is we're not the only ones using insights from behavioral science to help disadvantaged parents and children succeed. But we need a much greater effort to understand how cognitive biases influence parent decision-making and how behavioral insights can be used to enhance existing programs and create new programs that are cost-effective ways to help parents succeed. all of the work in the BIP Lab now is working on this puzzle of how we can get parents to focus on their children's future, and by focusing on their future, increase their current engagement with their children in the present. And we have a number of different but related studies in the lab that all share this common goal. For one thing, there's a lot we don't know about these behavioral tools, especially goal setting and reminders. For example, we need to find out how long we have to send reminders to people, say text messages, before they form a new habit and no longer need the reminders. Or, on the other hand, before they get totally bored with receiving reminders and just start ignoring them and revert back to their old behaviors. And this is one thing we'll be looking at in a program we call Show Up to Grow Up, which is a project that focuses on using reminders and commitment devices to increase attendance in head school programs. In addition, we can't send text message reminders for every single behavior that we want parents to do, because really, how many text messages are you going to read in a day? So we have to find some tool that changes a lot of behaviors simultaneously. And we're working on a project using a different behavioral tool called priming to do this. In this project, we help Head Start parents choose a primary school for their child to attend. Most of the parents in the Head Start programs we're working with just default to the neighborhood school, which might be the right decision, but they make that decision without actually choosing the neighborhood school. So we will help parents choose a school and use that choice process to prime or prompt parents to engage in educational activities related to school readiness. The priming creates a set of related positive behaviors aimed at one common goal, which in this case is school readiness. In addition, behavioral science and other social sciences have demonstrated the importance of peer effects. Peers can be a powerful influence, and it turns out that children in Head Start programs have many adults playing a parent style or parent type role in their lives. If we can get all those parents to reinforce one another's positive parenting by having them take on the role of reminders, of reminding one another, of helping one another set goals and monitoring that goals, we can create spillovers, positive spillovers from these low-cost behavioral tools. We get everybody working together. So we're testing the power of peer influence in a project aimed at children's early math learning. Finally, one of the things we know for sure is that good decision-making requires active focus and attention, and especially at the beginning when people are learning a new habit. So we're working on a project that aims to help parents find that focus through the use of stress reduction techniques so that they can have the cognitive bandwidth to manage and adapt to these cognitive biases. So you're supposed to say something here.
Right. So now comes the time when I ask Susan to give us the bottom line. You've described everything that we're doing in the lab. We've had a flavor of our recent research, and I think we have a roadmap for the next few years. But where are we with our thinking, and where do we come down on what we're learning here? We think what we're doing is new. It's a different approach than the traditional one, either in developmental psychology or in behavioral science. And with that, I would like to let Susan again have the last word to let you know where our current thinking is and where we're going with this.
Okay, so I think that what we're doing is right here. We're changing the assumptions about why parents parent in different ways, and hence about what kinds of programs are likely to give us the biggest bang for the buck. It may be that one of the biggest differences in the ways that advantaged and disadvantaged parents parent is not in what they know, or not even in the challenges that they face in their daily lives, even though we know that disadvantaged parents face many more challenges, but in how they adapt to these cognitive biases. We believe that helping parents adapt to the biases is central to promoting parent engagement and parents and children's success. And that's what we're doing.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you, everybody. And so now we will have time for questions. Lindsay, did you write your question on a So you raised your hand first. I'm going to deviate. While we're getting these, I'm going to invite Lindsay Chase Lansdale to ask the first question.
Three.
Oh, you can only ask one. Okay.
Are your economist colleagues happy with your calling it behavioral science and not behavioral economics?
We don't care.
Are you planning to study the impacts on children? And three, I think there are subgroups of parents, some of whom will respond amazingly to this and others will not.
Thanks, Lindsay. So Susan answered the first question. The second question, the answer is yes, absolutely. I mean, really,
Repeat the question.
Oh, sorry. The first question was, are the behavioral economists displeased with our calling this behavioral science? And well, first, no, and even if so, we wouldn't care. So, the answer to this, the second question, are we interested in kids' development? Absolutely. This was a proof of concept. This is our first study out of the gate, the PAC study. We had no idea. This is really the first study that took this, this approach to trying to change a key dimension of parent-child engagement. We really had absolutely no idea if it would work. So absolutely, we're going to look at kids' outcomes, and we have to think very carefully about what kind of, how much you need to move the needle on parenting to impact kid outcomes. And the third question is, yes, absolutely. Is there going to be a different, will all parents respond to a treatment like this? No. But many will. And our premise here is that this is so relatively low cost compared to business as usual in our field, as you know, that it is well worth trying for, I think, a large number of parents who will be very responsive. We can be much more efficient in how we allocate the funds that we have in targeting these kind of interventions to different groups of parents, and that's what we're aiming to do here.
Oh my gosh, there are so many great questions here. We should have a class on this. So this one is and several of them are, how did we identify present bias? And so just let me talk generally to that. There's quite a bit of work that's been done in developing tools to measure present bias. And we took one of those tools in which you ask parents, would you rather have $10 right this very moment or $30 6 weeks from now? And you ask them a whole bunch of questions like that, where they have choices between more now, or less now, or more at some future time. And so you do a whole bunch of questions like that, and then you can develop a sort of single model, a single measure of how present bias people are. That is, how much people want something right now versus more later. And we did that for all the parents and developed this measure. And then other people here asked, how do people develop present bias? And do some people have more? Obviously, some people have more than others. And we don't really know the answer to that question, though it's something that we hope to be working on. We know that there are variations in present bias. We don't know if there are more variations among the low-income population versus higher-income populations, but we do know that people with present bias are the ones who respond most to our intervention to overcome it. I hope you're going through it. Seriously, there's some great questions here.
A lot of great questions.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I'll pick one here.
Yeah.
I just got the same question that Susan just answered, so that's great that that's on your top of mind. Okay, here's two good ones. I'll just pick one at random. How did you know whether your control group was reading to their children only on the tablet? So we didn't, and we also didn't know whether the treatment group was reading only on the tablet. So let's just be clear that we were not measuring the sum total of all the reading that parents might have done using any mechanism, okay? We were, if you wanted to do a treatment that measured some impact on kids' cognitive test scores, for example, then you would care about all the different ways that parents were, promoting that through reading on a tablet or reading with books or some other thing. With this particular intervention that I described, we really just wanted to know if we could change the behavior of reading on this app because it was something we could objectively measure. So we're very committed to the idea that you shouldn't run a program on a thing that you tell parents they should be doing and then go back to them some weeks later and ask them if they did the thing you told them they should be doing. And so when you get into the realm of parenting, it is actually incredibly difficult to find an objective measure of a parent behavior that in contrast doesn't rely on some parent self-report on a survey. It's otherwise, very expensive. You could send in an observer to watch how parents and children interact, but that is a very expensive and time-consuming enterprise. So, just to be clear, we really just chose this particular device because we could measure it. Parents could have been doing a lot of reading in other ways. We actually don't think that they were because we know this from other studies. But one should think of this as a treatment that is reading to your child using this app on this tablet, not reading on any variety of ways.
Okay, so I have a variety of questions here that all sort of try and get to the same question, and that is, do the different constraints that low-income families face influence the degree of present bias that they have, and how do those different constraints, and especially things like violence and so on in neighborhoods, influence whether or not people are able to spend the time reading to their children, and the fact that low-income parents often work a lot and work irregular hours and those kinds of constraints. So, first of all, we don't really know how these different environmental influences influence present bias. It's something we would like to learn a lot more about, but we don't know that much about right now. Second of all, it is true that low-income families face many obstacles to achieving their goals. But it's also true that when we look at differences in engagement, that is how much time parents spend with their children and spend with their children in developmentally useful activities, controlling for amount of work, controlling for whether it's one parent or two parents, those things do not, they do not get rid of the difference between the amount of time that low and high income parents spend with their kids. So we think there is a margin in which even low income families facing all the constraints that they do could be spending more time engaged with their children, and even more importantly, that they want to do that. They want to be doing that. It's not that we're saying you should be doing that. It's that they're saying we want to do it, but somehow because they have complex lives, it's harder to get that focus. And that's what the kind of intervention that we had allows them to do. And I think actually one of the things I most like about the PAC study is that parents loved it. Because so many times we are asking low-income parents, we're telling them they're doing something wrong. We're always telling them, you're not doing enough of this, you're not doing enough of that, you should be doing more of that. And that may be just adding to the stress that they're under. But this was really positive. How much do you want to read to your child? Well, then do it. And they loved it. And that was, to me, one of the best things about this, and maybe one of the more important things about it too. I don't know. Got one? And then
Actually, I think we're done.
Yeah.
So I guess we'll say we'll stand really close to each other and say
Thank you. Thank you very much.